And welcome to the Dean Obeidallah Show, also known as the Dean's Report Live. Joining us now, our friend Glen Kirschner, former 30-year federal prosecutor, served in the U.S. Army in the JAG Corps, and he's got a wildly popular Substack and his YouTube show, Justice Matters, over 1 million followers. Be a follower. Join it. You're going to get smarter every single day. Glenn, good to see you. Thanks for making time here on a huge news day with the Jeffrey Epstein documents.
Great to be with you, Dean. And it's nice to have something that I would characterize as good news, important news. You know, this is going to begin moving us potentially in the right direction.
I don't know what that direction is, but whatever it is, I'm with you. I like it. So I wanted to highlight a few things that I flagged, and you can add if there's other things. One is this is getting a little press, but I find it actually, the hair on the back of my neck literally went up when I read it. It's the Republicans today, to counter Democrats, released thousands of other emails. Some reporter who did a good job went through the emails and found one dated August 23rd, 2018, and I read the email, so it's real. August 23rd, 2018, from Jeffrey Epstein to former Obama White House counsel Kathy Rumler. How do you pronounce
Kathy
it?
Rumler, yeah.
Kathy Rumler discussing Michael Cohen flipping at the time, about the fixer at the time. So this is dated August 23rd, 2018, and he writes, "You see, I know how dirty Donald is." That's August 2018. Then Jeffrey Epstein is charged with crimes the next year in July. Within a short time after that, Jeffrey Epstein is dead. As a former prosecutor, what red flags, alarms are going off here?
You know, Dean, nobody wants to have a former associate or a former criminal associate, and I'm going to speak hypothetically. Nobody wants to have a former criminal associate flip on him, snitch on him, give him up for whatever crimes he may have committed. And when I see, this is the old 30-year prosecutor in me, when I see an email like that you just read from Jeffrey Epstein to a former White House counsel, and if it's in the context of talking about people flipping, like Michael Cohen flipping on Donald Trump, and Epstein says, guess what? I know how dirty Donald is. That is a real danger zone for Donald Trump and for anybody who at the time was in his administration and might have wanted to protect him. What is the ultimate in protecting somebody against a snitch? The snitch has got to go, right? Got to go. Now, I know that Jeffrey Epstein got suicided in his jail cell, right? Listen, I still have lots of questions about that. I saw all of the death scene. I use that advisedly because if it's not a murder, a crime, you don't call those crime scene photos. You call them death scene photos. I looked at every one I could get my hands on. I read everything I could. I have questions.
Right.
I have suspicions. Dean, as a 22-year homicide prosecutor, murder prosecutor in D.C., I saw suicides that were made to look like murders. I saw murders that were made to look like suicides. I investigated a bunch of them, both nationally and internationally. I was chief of homicide in D.C. So, you know, I am not prepared to render an opinion on what happened to Jeffrey Epstein in that cell, you know, when he turned up dead. But when you see emails where Jeffrey Epstein is willing to share with others that I got dirt on Donald, it's interesting because thereafter he gets charged, he gets indicted. What happens when you get indicted? I can tell you many, many, many times that is when you become a cooperating witness. That is when you flip on a bigger criminal fish to try to save yourself, reduce your charges, reduce your jail time. And so maybe they approached him on that. Maybe they didn't. Maybe nobody in the Trump administration wanted to kind of poke that hornet's nest to see what Jeffrey Epstein knew about Donald Trump. But lo and behold, Jeffrey Epstein turns up dead. Boy, these emails, and it was a huge dump by the GOP. We can talk about the implications of that or what the motivation may have been for the GOP to release these emails. But it feels like the tide is maybe beginning to turn, and hopefully not just, you know, on the Epstein matter.
Yeah, look, I mean, everyone who's watched Law and Order, I used to be a lawyer too. I mean, things don't always line up that neatly, and we don't know for sure if anybody in Trump world knew about this email. But we don't know if Jeffrey Epstein was telling other people he had dirt on Donald Trump. And it wasn't just Kathy Rumler, it was others. And all of a sudden, Jeffrey Epstein charged in 2019 for the first time federally since his sweetheart deal in 2008, where they wanted to protect him, but now it was no longer protecting him. And then he turns up dead in a prison cell. And 2 + 2 = 4, folks. Someone wanted to protect Donald Trump. Now, was Trump involved? I have no idea. We have people who protect the king, whoever the king is, thinking they're doing the right thing. Or Donald Trump, he smoked like a mobster in his first term. It hasn't changed, where rats and snitches, and he gets into the whole thing. You never know, right? I mean, to me, this is one of the most stunning things that deserves far more media coverage for him to say. Because when I put the timeline together, I'm like, when was this email? 2018, August. He's charged July of 2019. I'm like, wow, he's out there saying he's got dirt on Trump, and then he's gone.
Yeah,
That's
go. I know what I would do with that as a prosecutor. I would be in the grand jury going scorched earth, subpoenaing every witness, every document, every email, every text message, every cell phone, communication, cell site information. I would be doing forensic searches on everybody's computers, and we would get to the bottom of it. And maybe there are some good investigative journalists left out there in corporate media, legacy media, but Dean, I don't want to turn this into a let's beat up on corporate media, screed or rant. But
nice.
for gosh sakes, how about they start paying attention to this? I mean, I know independent media is the wave of the present, and that's you, and that's me, and that's Jim Acosta and Don Lemon and others.
Yep.
But you know what? We're going to be on it. We're going to be on it.
We are. There's no doubt. So let me, and then we'll get back to what you want to highlight. I have just two others. One of the other ones highlighted today was a 2011 email. This is the one Democrats released. That one I read to you about Dirty Don. That the Republicans released that in response. But this one said, this is Jeffrey Epstein to Ghislaine Maxwell, his sex traffic peddler ringleader. Quote, I want you to realize that the dog that hasn't barked yet is Trump. Victim, it's redacted, spent hours at my house with him. He has never once been mentioned. And the victim, and then Republicans, to try to make it seem like it's all okay, said the victim was Virginia Giuffre, which to me makes it even worse because, again, I don't know if Republicans who released this know what that means. So let me just touch on quickly what that means. Virginia Giuffre was 6 years old, known as Virginia Roberts, worked at Mar-a-Lago in Trump's spa. Virginia Giuffre's father worked at Mar-a-Lago. Donald Trump knew the father. That's how she got a job at 16. Ghislaine Maxwell recruited her directly from the spa. This is undisputed facts. From the spa to go to Epstein. She has sex with Epstein that first day. For the next couple of years, she's trafficked out, including to Prince Andrew. She's the one, when she was 17, 18, had sex with Prince Andrew and numerous other men. So Donald Trump is in a house. Undisputed. Republicans are not disputing Trump was there. They're saying, well, she always said that Trump did nothing wrong. Trump sees a pretty teenage girl at Jeffrey Epstein's house. He's in his mid 40s and doesn't ask a question. He is not concerned at all. It's not jarring. He doesn't go to the police. What does that say to you as a former prosecutor?
Oh, if you're not concerned, it's something that you have hypothetically um, grown accustomed to,
Mm-hmm.
been a part of. You don't object to something that you're participating in or that you approve of if you see others doing it. Now, we don't know. And the really interesting line, one of them in that email is, Trump is the dog who hasn't barked yet.
Right.
Again, we don't know what Epstein meant by that. Where the mind of this old prosecutor goes is he hasn't he hasn't spoken, he hasn't cooperated. I mean, listen, if Trump knew what Epstein was doing, Trump could certainly snitch Epstein out.
Mm-hmm.
But what I will say is that if you're complicit, if you're involved in similar criminal conduct, well, then you're snitching Epstein out at your own peril because then Epstein can flip on you. And then it's what we call a race to the prosecutor's office. Who's going to be the first one to snitch? Because whoever first, gives up other members of a criminal conspiracy is the one who typically gets the best deal from the prosecutors, the first one through the prosecutor's door. So I don't know exactly what he meant by, well, Trump is the dog who hadn't barked yet, but that's one possible interpretation.
And to add some more facts, in July of this year, Donald Trump was asked about Virginia Giuffre, who sadly enough killed herself earlier this year. And that is the woman, people might remember this line where Trump said, "Oh, Epstein stole someone from me." That's who it was. It was Virginia Giuffre, who was known as Virginia Roberts at the time. And I'll read exactly what he said in Air Force One. He said, they said, well, "Do you mean Virginia Giuffre was the woman stolen?" And he said, "I think she worked at the spa. I think so. I think that was one of the people. He stole her. And by the way, she had no complaints about us, as you know, none whatsoever." So Donald Trump knew exactly who she was. She was 16, worked in Mar-a-Lago in the spa. Trump sees her now, it's undisputed, at Jeffrey Epstein's house. He's in his mid 40s at the time, and no problem whatsoever. And then Trump says he stole her, and that's why he ended his relationship, because he did it again. And I always remember Trump using the word again. He had seen it before. So what you're saying earlier, Glenn, all fits in. This is a guy who's seen this before. He knows Jeffrey Epstein up to. He may or may not be part of it, but this is Jeffrey's MO.
Yeah, and you steal property, you don't steal human beings. That's a
Right.
really odd way for a grown man to phrase, assuming, let's put the benign spin on it, she was a particularly good employee at Mar-a-Lago and Jeffrey Epstein courted her away. Now, we know why he would have courted her away.
Right.
But, to say he stole that girl from me, that is a little bit of a glimpse into Donald Trump's mind. But if we kind of pull back now to 30,000 feet, Dean, look, I'm really interested to hear your take on why the GOP is releasing stuff that appears to be potentially extraordinarily damaging. One might even call it presidency ending. We're not there yet,
Right.
but what is motivating the GOP at this moment to all of a sudden, right? Look at what happened in the midterms. Now we've got Representative Grijalva, I assume, being sworn in.
Better be.
All of a sudden, maybe the calculus is changing. What do you think is motivating the GOP?
Look, that's a great question. Some of this was released by Democrats, some of it released by Republicans. But I want to add one more fact before I answer that,
Hmm.
because I've been really deep diving on this stuff now for a while on the Epstein thing. I found it very intriguing as a former lawyer. So I went back and read a lot of the Ghislaine Maxwell reporting about her trial in 2021. One of the four victims that testified at the trial testified under a pseudonym Jane. She testified under oath in federal court that she was 14 years old when Ghislaine Maxwell recruited her for Jeffrey Epstein to have sex with. When she was 14, and this is under oath, Jeffrey Epstein brought her to Mar-a-Lago to meet Donald Trump. And then later, she participated in Donald Trump's 1998 Miss Teen USA beauty pageant. And for Donald Trump, for Epstein to bring his 14-year-old girl like a trophy wife, but instead it's a trophy child, to meet Donald Trump at Mar-a-Lago, to me, is you fill in these blanks, and you're a former prosecutor, when you build a case block by block. Now we're getting a through line here from the mid 1990s to early 2000. Trump knows everything that is going on. That is my takeaway.
It looks like it. It looks like where there's smoke, there's fire. But as a prosecutor, I don't bring cases based on smoke.
Right.
I bring cases based on fire. I need to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that Donald Trump or the target of any investigation was involved in criminal activity. And I have to be satisfied, Dean, that I
Mhm.
have enough admissible evidence to prove guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. You can indict almost anything based on probable cause, which is a relatively low level evidentiary standard, but federal prosecutors need to have more than that. If we're going to indict somebody, we need to be satisfied that we have a reasonable likelihood of success on the merits. That means that we have enough admissible evidence to prove guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. Now, this looks like it is more than enough to open a grand jury investigation and present witnesses on all of this. And here is where one of the sticking points comes in. I worked primarily violent crime and RICO cases, but I also worked some sex crimes, rape cases. And it can be really challenging for the victims to fully participate in the process, the investigation, and the trial. Dean, they've been victimized in so many ways by adult men that it can be very challenging for them. And that's why you never re victimize a victim. But that doesn't mean you don't work with them, support them, and try to get them to a place where they're able and they're comfortable telling the story about what happened to them. And it's only once you get to that place with them, and you can't get there with all victims. I can tell you, Dean, some
Right.
victims will never cooperate in the process. So we prosecutors have to strike a balance, not doing anything that's going to re-victimize them, but making sure we give them all the support that they need to be able to tell the story so we can then build a case, not just based on their testimony, but on them corroborating, supporting all of the other evidence that we've developed. It's a real challenge to be a sex crimes prosecutor. And I know
Sure.
people who have devoted their whole lives to it, and they are heroes, period.
And let me add one more fact here, Mr. Prosecutor. The, Virginia Gouffre, who was 16, recruited from Mar-a-Lago and sent out and pawned out to have sex with Epstein and others by Epstein himself. She, in her own book recently came out, said that this all took place between 2000 and 2002. That's the only time she was involved with Epstein. We know from this email today that Donald Trump saw her at Jeffrey Epstein's. Republicans are not disputing he was there. So it was in that window of 2000 to 2002. Let me read you a comment Donald Trump made in 2002 to New York Magazine. He said, I've known Jeffrey for 15 years. Terrific guy. He's a lot of fun to be with. It's even said he likes beautiful women as much as I do, and many of them on the younger side. He already had seen Virginia Gouffre there. He had met the 14-year-old girl dating Donald Trump, dating Jeffrey Epstein when he made that comment.
Yeah, and you know that there's a tell right there, if not a flat out admission.
I
And
just,
and, and importantly, Dean, every word uttered by Donald Trump for all of time, there is no statute of limitations on being able to use evidence to prove a crime has been committed, which is different from bringing a charge, which may have timed out depending on the nature of the charge. There's what's called a statute of limitations, but for sex trafficking of children, there is none. You can bring those charges whenever. It's like murder.
right.
Not in all of the states, but in the federal jurisdiction. Anything Donald Trump ever said, anything he ever posted, anything he ever wrote, it's all what's called an admission of a party opponent. It's admissible directly in court against him to help prove the case. So all of these statements, the ones you're relating, could be, I don't want to say cobbled together. They would all be potentially introduced into evidence to paint a picture. And, I always told my jurors, Dean, no one piece of evidence proves guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. No one piece of evidence may prove anything. So, I used to say it's like putting a puzzle together. You don't look at one piece of the puzzle, and if you can't figure out what the entire picture is, what do? You don't throw the puzzle piece away. You interlock it with another piece and another and another and another. And eventually, guess what? The picture emerges, and you see beyond a reasonable doubt what the picture is. And if the picture is that somebody committed a crime, you hold them accountable.
Right. And Donald Trump has not been charged with a crime. And I'm not suggesting he will be charged with a crime. I don't have that evidence. But what I do believe with every fiber, he knew what was going on. But also, does it matter that someone is caught in a lie in regards to all this? And what I mean is today in the emails, there's the exchange between Michael Wolff and Jeffrey Epstein. And it's in 2015, and it's before Trump's going to go on air. And he says something about, Wolf says to him, what do you think? What would you ask him if you were going to be the moderator at this thing, sort of that kind of stuff? And he said, I would just let him ask him about being on the plane. Let's see if he denies it and the
Yeah.
island and stuff like that. Right. So that's interesting. What corporate media is not putting together is that in 2024, Donald Trump put in writing, and I will read his post on social media. He wrote, quote, I was never on Epstein's plane. It's all fake. That's January 2024. Earlier this year, Trump's own DOJ released flight logs that showed Donald Trump was on that plane 8 times. The pilot testified in the Ghislaine Maxwell trial. He recognized Donald Trump from being on that plane. So we have Donald Trump knowingly lying, and the media's not putting. They're just reporting the first part of this without going. Yeah, actually, Donald Trump was caught lying about not being on the plane. He denied in writing being on the plane, and he was on the plane. And I don't understand why corporate media is not putting that together. It's so easy.
Could it be that corporate media is afraid of retaliation by dear leader? That
Yeah,
could be.
yeah,
So let me talk about the value, the evidentiary value of a lie like that. A lie proves consciousness of guilt. Period. Prosecutors will introduce. Now we don't always introduce a lie. Let me tell you why. If it's a murder case and we have a statement by the perpetrator, by the person who's charged with the crime, I did not commit that murder. Well, we might not introduce that. Why? Because that gives him a defense and it can't be cross examined. So you don't just put exculpatory statements by the perpetrator in front of the jury, but you do when it is, I was never on that plane. And then you have out of his mouth or out of records released by his DOJ that he was on the plane, because now you can put the lie to his claim, and that shows consciousness of guilt. There's no way of looking directly into the human mind and see somebody's intent or motive, but you can get pretty damn close. Like when you can prove that the words out of his mouth were in an attempt to cover up wrongdoing.
So let's go back in the last couple of minutes here to the question you posed. Why would Republicans release this? And we talked briefly before we started. I mean, you can share your view, and it could be they want Trump gone. It could be it's 20,000 emails or documents they released, and no one really went through it in the kind of detail you should go through. There's different explanations.
The
I
1,000
think
FBI agents didn't come up with this, you think?
that's very weird. Why wouldn't FBI flag some of this stuff? So, I mean, does it give it more credibility that the FBI and DOJ is actually producing everything or close to everything, or we don't really know?
Well, we don't know if they're going to produce everything. I will never give Pam Bondi credit for producing the entirety of the file, including the
Right.
parts that really directly implicate Donald Trump potentially. I don't think we're ever going to see those voluntarily coming out of Pam Bondi's Department of Justice. But the GOP releasing some of these things, first of all, you can never discount incompetence and imbecility, that they just negligently didn't go through everything before they put it out. I think that's less likely.
Okay.
But part of this may just be a little bit of hopium on my part. But Donald Trump is dragging the Republican Party down. Right? Look at what happened in the midterms. I have been caught my old stomping grounds. I used to live in Clifton, New Jersey. My pop used to coach football in Passaic High School
Yeah.
in Passaic County, New Jersey. Mikey Sherrill flipped Passaic County, New Jersey, from going for Trump to going for her by like 12 or 14 points. I mean, that's just an historic turnaround, right? He's dragging the Republican Party down. All they ever care about, these Republicans in Congress, is their own reelection prospects. And if they are believing that maybe the only chance they have to keep their power, to keep their office, is by separating from Trump and getting somebody else in there, they will separate from Trump all day long. And if the Epstein files turn out to be a convenient way to begin separating from Trump, so be it. I don't put that past them.
I don't put it past them because they are the most craven, calculating people you've ever seen in your lives. This GOP, they hated Trump at the beginning. Then when he can help them, they love him. And if there's a point where he is an albatross, they will jettison him in a second. I could not agree with you more, Glenn, if that's the scenario. So we're going to find out. Interesting. Everyone should watch how Republicans go on talk shows, how they respond to questions about this. If you start hearing them saying things like, well, there's some questions that need to really be answered, or I'm concerned about this, then it could be that scenario. If they go, it's all BS, it's fake news, whatever, then they're doing the same old playbook. But we'll see. But Glenn, before I let you go, where can people follow you? Where do you want them to follow you?
So, find me on Substack. We do community meetings almost every night at about 8 or 8:30, sometimes a little later. So come on over to see me on Substack. You can watch my daily videos on YouTube, Justice Matters. And tonight, if anybody happens to be in the DC area, I'm going to be on stage at the Union Stage in the Wharf in DC with our friend John Fugelsang. He's going to be doing his comedy set, and I'm going to do a Q&A with him about his book. And no, I'm not a book salesman, but Separation of Church and Hate. And it is a sane person's guide to taking back the Bible from fundamentalists, fascists, and flock fleecing frauds. It's a brilliant book. It'll make you learn. It'll make you laugh. I'm going to be on stage with John talking about it tonight in DC.
Say hello to my brother John. I love him. You're a great guy. Thanks, Glenn, and thanks everyone for tuning in. Really appreciate it. Thanks for all your comments. I look forward to chatting with you soon, Glenn. Take care, everyone.
See you, Dean. Thanks.